Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer on strike based in Los Angeles, California. How are you all doing? Welcome. This is the 600th episode, special episode. I mean, look, I don't put a lot of stock in these multiple of 100s being that special, but it's nice to have a reason to celebrate. It's nice to have a reason to invite a special guest on. I try on these multiple of 100 episodes. I don't even have an easy word to say for these because it's not necessarily anniversary episodes. Anniversary of Beginnings is in January. But I try to invite someone on who has been important to me creatively, whose work I enjoy a lot. I mean, that's every guest. I've never had a guest on who I did not like. But, you know, the multiple of 100 episodes is someone super special, I suppose. But yeah, I'm not going to sit here in the beginning and reminisce or, you know, dive into the pool of nostalgia. I'll just say it's nice to have been doing this project for so long. It's very interesting to do something like this for so long. I wish I can impart some wisdom or some lessons I've learned over the last 13 years. But the fact is, with the strike going and so many other things happening in life, such as the settling in of dystopia, I really have not taken too much time. I don't even like to go back and listen to old episodes, but I haven't taken the time to sit here and think about it. I did go and listen for 2 seconds because I was trying to figure out when Mark left the show. Episode 107 was his last episode. And I was going back and I found, around that same time, I talked to Aisha Tyler and I talked to comics creator Bill Griffith. And I was like, I wonder if these are terrible. I have no idea. I mean, I was still a UCB student and had very little performance experience before that. So I was like, these early episodes, I cringe. I probably cringe thinking about episodes from 5 years ago, but I think it sounded pretty good. All right, at the very least, if I was raw, the subject of this show is always interesting enough that the guest, even in those early raw days, the guest comes through with interesting things to say. And today, episode 600, no different. Why today, my very special guest is Ben Edlund. If you don't know who Ben is, I'm going to read you his bio right now. While still in high school, comics creator and TV writer Ben Edlund began developing the satirical superhero The Tick, who became the mascot of the New England Comics newsletter. After a production error led to them needing a new title quickly, the New England Comics folks invited Ben to create a series around the character. The Tick has had numerous comic runs, as well as a cartoon in the 1990s, and 2 live-action series, the most recent of which ran on Amazon Prime from 2016 to 2019. In fact, why not check out my episode from a couple years ago with Griffin Newman, who played Arthur on the latest Tick revival. Anyway, in addition to his comics work and creating the Tick TV shows, Ben has also written on over a dozen other shows, some of which include The Venture Brothers, Firefly, Angel, Clone Wars, and many others. Whew, I gotta say, seeing the Tick cartoon when I was a tween was a revelation. I remember it just enraptured me. I made a Tick mug in art class. I cut out the word spoon and taped it to my chest for my AP English yearbook photo. I thought I would be embarrassed thinking back to that, and I'm just like, no, that was fun. So, I was absolutely not kidding when at the end of this interview with Ben, I say I think the Tick changed my trajectory. I think it was something like, I learned you could do satire that also had some emotions in it. I don't really know if I pulled a concrete lesson. I just know that the Tick filled me with some kind of electricity, and you know what? Okay, here. Maybe it was that the Tick, much like Andy, who was trying to figure out his emotions, the Tick was also trying to figure out his place in the world. And maybe that's why I identified with the character so much. I don't know. I'll talk about it in therapy next week. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this episode. If you like it, why not subscribe to the show? Why not leave a review? You can also follow me on all the social media places at Andy Beckerman. Coming up next week, Rod Argent, the founder and principal songwriter for The Zombies. Yes, The Zombies. So stay tuned for that. But for now, let's talk to Ben. amazing. Did you ever see those photos of Hemingway where he's typing and there's like 30 cats around him? And I'm like, how did he type anything? Because I can't make a tweet without the cats jumping on me and hitting the screen and running around. And I'm not a famous author, and I have no idea how he was able to do what he did.
Being Hemingway, not me, but I'm just imagining being Hemingway, surrounded by cats. I wouldn't be surprised if all those cats know if they step on the typewriter, they get grabbed by the back of the neck and thrown against the wall.
Oh, okay.
So they're trained to be around, but not on.
Right.
I'm not accusing him but he really was into poking bulls.
Right.
I mean, like his whole arrangement with animals was a sort of almost manifest destiny, like they're for us. So I don't think he would suffer what you suffer. Right. No offense. No.
That's okay. I'm not going to go hunt in Africa, and I'm not going to use the threat of physical violence against my cats.
There you go.
Behave.
So they rule.
Yeah. Yes. Do you have pets?
I have a rabbit that is my wife and I have a dog, and I have a rabbit because she's allergic to rabbits. I didn't want a rabbit. It wandered into my backyard. It's this white, it's like a magician's rabbit escaped and was just eating my, vegetation in the backyard, and would soon be food for coyotes. So I took this rabbit in, and I would say it's more like a roommate. I have a rabbit who is a roommate.
I've had pets for most of my life, but it was an accident because my parents didn't want pets. Mm-hmm. And then one day a cat wandered, like I left the house when I was a kid, and my sister was behind me, but she was behind me like 20 steps. And then a cat ran in between us, and that became our pet. We couldn't find its owner. Mm-hmm. And then it became my inseparable friend, basically, up until I went to college.
That's cool.
And then she was very cold to me when I would come back for the summer because I had left her.
Right. Yeah.
But it's a complete historical accident. Like there was no, and now like my wife and I, we don't want kids. All we want is pets.
How many pets do you have?
We one of our cats just passed away about a month ago, but we had two cats. Have one cat now and a dog, Mabel.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I don't know. It's just interesting to me. Do you think of like any of those kind of contingencies in your life, like a thing that was just contingent, and if it hadn't happened, something you might have like turned into a different person?
Oh, of course. Yeah, I think that's like basically life is so full of important junctions like that you can't really even probably count, how you've formed and how many important like contingencies like that or another. For me, having a child was quite a forming contingency, like that did a lot of change. Having animals also. I grew up with animals. And when you have connected with an animal, I think you're just not going to think about nature quite the same way as if you didn't. Like you really do have a personal connection. There's a lot of personification going on. There's a lot of like projection, but there's something's going on. You're really having a foster kind of familial link with another species, and it's pretty profound.
Yeah, I think it fosters your empathy. And when you were younger, do you think that was something that brought out your empathy? Your family having pets?
I'd say it was part of it. Yeah. I think I also had, pretty, I'd say, empathetic parents. Parents who were concerned with bringing up kids who weren't cruel and, kids who were reasonable humans.
Yeah. My parents were the same way. They were very much about before it was quote unquote cool, but inclusivity and not treating people differently and things like that.
Always been cool. It's always been cool. No, yeah. All of that was a sort of a foregone conclusion. My parents, in our home, I would say. So that was something to be grateful for. Anyway, yeah.
Was it an ethical thing for them? Were they religious? Was it just purely a philosophical kind of, we believe this is what's right in the world?
I would say it lay more in ethics and philosophy. Both of them were, my dad was atheist and my mom was probably agnostic. And religion was really not a thing for us. I remember being up in Canada at a museum. We had family up in Canada, and we were in a museum where I was with my mother, and there was a bunch of devotional art in a display case from probably the Renaissance or some period around there, and a lot of depictions of the crucifix and Christ. And I was very young, but I hadn't really seen this before. So I started asking my mom about this in this public museum in front of a lot of people who were there under more religious circumstances. And I was like, who is that guy? And she's like, oh, that's Jesus. And she was sort of like, she really hadn't discussed this with me. And I was like, is he a good guy or a bad guy? Because he was really getting ripped up. Yeah. Anyway.
And she was like, he's a good guy. Some of the people that follow him are bad guys. That's how that goes.
It was, he was a pretty good guy. No, he was, anyway, I would say that was something that, it at least made, coming to terms with religion, not an important, I've seen friends who've come up with grueling personal struggles with what they're going to do with their own sort of stance or take on all of that and what has been sort of impressed upon them by their youth. So I've grown to be grateful that that's not one of the projections that I had to overcome.
Yeah.
And there are plenty.
Did you have any feelings of faith at all? Like a connection? When I think of faith, I think of just like a need to feel connected to something larger than yourself, whether that's religion or something.
I went through a period of being a pretty strict materialist, which would have been, I think, in accordance with my father's like worldview. And then I shed that and am now a real loopy cat. Essentially something like a panpsychist idealist, where I would say right now engaged in a sort of a phenomenon of consciousness. Is like matter would be our inside the game way of interpreting certain forms of consciousness reflecting upon itself. This is classic shit. Very old, very old. Anyway, but so I'm very much, I'd say at this point, connected with that sense of the larger, larger things, but it's not expressed in any kind of personified God or what have you. That's too much fun. I don't allow myself to have that much fun.
Did you find yourself missing something? Like, I think about faith a lot just because I grew up, my parents believe in God. I don't think I ever did. And I don't think it ever made sense to me. But the older I get, the more I realize there's a lack of that connection to something larger. And something I miss that kind of whatever that connection is.
I think that is one of the ailments of, our time is
Yeah.
that there's a baby has been thrown out with the bathwater. I don't think it's anything that's directly connected with one or another religious observance, and it's more like this was a period, or we're coming out of a period of like almost a system of rejections to try and get to the truth. So you reject everything, including certainty. You get to this postmodernist place, and then you're rejecting everything. And it's a lot of fun until you get to one place, and then you're in the middle of the night and you realize somewhere along the way you rejected meaning itself.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to get long or far without some grasp of a sense of meaning. And you can get it any way you want. You could be a full-on atheist. I had meaning from time to time, but the pilot light kept going out. But you can get it, right? You can get it. You can be Richard Dawkins and be about selfish genes and be like, oh, the meaning is the beauty of this crazy, self-eating miasma. And you go, well, if that works for you, great. But yeah, I think that that is something that has, if you've lost it, you need to find it again. And we see a lot of different advertised paths for returning to a sense of meaning, and we're in a very, very cynical, sort of jaded period where those advertisements, those sort of signs that might at one time have, well, I don't think they was probably always like next to something like the ancient version of an advertisement for the ShamWow would be right next to a legitimate path. Anyway, we're going way back.
No, I mean, this is interesting to me because this has been a preoccupation of mine where you have this kind of like pre-enlightenment period that is full of wonder. Then the wonder gets drained out of the world like a ShamWow being wrung out. And you have the Enlightenment. And then the Enlightenment comes to an end around World War I, where everyone thinks that because, rationality is not going to lead to a better world necessarily. It's just led to us coming up with better ways to murder each other. That collapses, and then we're living in, I've been calling it like we're living in the corpse of the Enlightenment. Like it is a giant kind of like philosophical body that is rotting around us. And we're trying to figure out how to either do we abandon the corpse? I'm going with the metaphor. Either we abandon the corpse for another living body. I guess we're all parasites in this metaphor. Right. Or we figure out some way to re-enchant the body and then, I guess, give it life again. Because right now it's just, because the other danger is to just live in the zombie. So right now it's a corpse. The danger is living in a body, in the zombie of the Enlightenment, in which we just do the kinds of things we had done in the Enlightenment, but it doesn't have any meaning. And I fear that's what's happening at the moment.
Yes, I think that's a colorful and reasonable. There's a whole world going on because we're parasites, but we apparently have at our command some level of magic, or possibly can get to magic to re-enchant. This is good. But I would say that is a viable way of describing the madness we're in, right? Yeah. The idea, it's sort of there's a sense of decomposition, and then the fruitfulness of decay, and the sickly sweet explosions of putrescence and so forth. But I think of it sort of like, or have been recently, thinking of it in terms of if you were at some kind of airport waiting to kind of, and this is going to seem very naive, almost like a St. Peter's Gate kind of, but you're just waiting for your next life, right?
Sure.
Like you enjoy this game. You enjoy dicking around in this particular field of space and time, life and death, right? Opposites. You like being here in the place of opposites, and it makes you feel good, so you want to come back. And you're like, oh, what would I like to do? What I mean, sure, the Enlightenment could be interesting. It's probably not the best, most comfortable place. Maybe you'd want to go to a place where luxury was kind of, if you're in the right space, at a pretty achievable premium,
Mhm.
you know, and the world. I mean, this is a time of incredible, fascinating, explosive development, and also like demolition. So the Enlightenment, I mean, that's a sort of a philosophical framework, and it also contains the scientific method and things like it, right? But like that, to me, those are sort of the underpinnings or the over whatever of like, okay, industrial revolution creates a certain way of being. And this last century, there was a machining of people. So you look at the education system and all this stuff that creates human machine parts. That was the one I thought, I don't want to get into a side. I didn't love everything about Snowpiercer, but when the little boy becomes the machine part in the engine, I go, that's a good arrival, right? Like that, I get it, right? Because that's what we did to ourselves, pulling ourselves out of an agrarian space and into the cities, and a whole like different way of learning, or that's all falling apart now.
Yeah.
Right. And it's getting less and less abstract as more and more jobs are being absorbed. And like we're really in a place of, I'd say, pretty calamitous stakes, exciting potential outcomes, and a lot of unpredictable novelty, right in our real-time experience, like fireworks. This is a very interesting time to be alive. Interesting times, which is a curse. It's a curse, right? I curse you to be in interesting times. But I mean, like this, I think, anyway, I sort of rambled off of your prompt, but like essentially this is to me it's an amazing period of time. It's an amazing human, like I'm not saying it's all great. I'm saying it's like all of it. Like I buy your decomposing corpse and the need to maybe move it around or jump it. But I mean, think about it. Parasites with a corpse are happy parasites. That's what they live for.
Some are, if they're in a meaty part of the corpse. If you just got bones.
I mean, I don't know. I guess so. So it's incumbent upon you to move to some other part of the corpse, dude.
This is okay. I mean, considering this is, we're not talking about actual, we're not talking about actual things. So this is not a discussion of wealth or food or having that kind of stuff. What I mean by that is spiritually move to the part of the corpse. And this is, I think, what I end up talking about this a lot on the show, and I think about it a lot, is that are we on the show? Is this the show? This is the show.
Oh, all right. Yeah. Just speaking in terms of realities. Okay, good. All right. Very good. Continue.
It is. I mean, if string theory is correct, in another dimension, this is not the show. In one of the 13?
Well, no, I'd say those 11 dimensions contain very little each unto themselves. But then that seems to lead itself to this multiverse thing or whatever. And that's where apparently maybe in another space, right?
Maybe
we're doing something else. That's all. To me, that all feels like people who don't understand shit trying to explain shit.
Yeah.
Meaning that it explains it enough for us to make gainful predictions, which is handy, right? Allows a huge number of things to be developed. But like, we do not have a full, we got hands on an elephant, bunch of, like this is not a full picture. So it leads to some pretty, it leads to strings and 11 of stuff. Yeah, we're pretty sure there's 11 of stuff. And you go, okay.
The math works out. If I remember, it's been a long time since I read about string theory, but I used to teach a philosophy of science course where we
cool.
did string theory in the middle
Yeah.
of it. If I remember correctly, it's just math because they don't have any actual, as far as I know, empirical data.
No.
But the math works out to be like either something like 11 dimensions or 18 dimensions. And they're like, well, we don't know. It's just that the math works out this way. And if we ever find any kind of empirical data, we can maybe say which one. But that's just kind of what the math says. And then you're like, okay.
Yeah.
I guess that's what the math
says. It's what the math says to our brains.
Yes.
And to like what it's been like to grow up where we grew up and make conclusions like we make. And then we go, oh, you know what it says? There's 11 of stuff.
Okay. But this was what I was going to say that I was obsessed with is that we grew up, you're a little older than me, but not so much that I don't think we have some of the same kind of existential makeup or references, but we grew up in a time where the hangover from the post-war period still told us that we could do whatever we wanted, basically, and you could have the life you wanted, and everything was kind of static. Like life was static. The world was static, and so living in that world, you could have a plan, as opposed to now. I think people growing up either post 9/11, post 2008 crash. I don't know where you want to draw the line, but they grew up in a world where everything is kind of loose and the earth is moving a lot, and there isn't space necessarily for them to develop the kind of existential desires that we did. And I'm kind of curious if the stasis of the 70s, 80s into the 90s, growing up in that, what did that provide for you for your existential desires and dreams?
I mean, a pretty good ride. I mean, when you think about the 90s, I'd say especially for me, the 80s were a kind of going from childhood to relative young adulthood. And then the 90s were my 20s, and into the 30s. And that's a kind of a time where like you're figuring a lot of crap out and you're running around doing a lot of dumb stuff and trying to form yourself and so forth. For that to take place that was an abundant time, the 90s. And it was also a time of, like, I'd say general distraction. There were things like the Gulf War, and I mean, there were things that were tremendous problems and agonies, but in the world I was growing up in New York City, making use of media and turning that into my career, at a time when it was hard to get into, but if you got into it, it was a good experience to sort of be in there. I mean, it was also whatever. It was every kind of experience. Anyway, it granted certain kinds of access and a great deal of a sense of accomplishment, where I think now, it's the Wild West. There isn't one place to go. There's every place to go. Like, if you want to be involved in media, you can make your own media immediately, and you can actually go places other than where I knew I had to go. As a kid, there was a lot of clarity. I want to go where they made Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's great. I think that's a really great thought, that there was a sense of a pathway, a sense of some kind of clarity, in a way that there might be so much open now that it feels a little like, well, which path is the right path, or where do I go, or how do I do this? Even though it wasn't like that obvious before. Like, I didn't know that this was a real career until, I don't know, somewhere into my 20s.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like late 20s too.
Right. I was obsessed personally. Like, I had a Super 8 camera, as a kid, that you buy, that you go to the yard sale, you get the Super 8 camera, you start to make movies on your own, which is a disastrous prospect. A kid handling like these fucking, pardon me, but like very technically challenging for like a
Right.
10-year-old, and so all my films were overexposed and ruined and messed up, but I was just like wanting to do that. And like, returning to your earlier statement that there was an establishment that was still kind of there in a way where its sort of platitudes and edicts were audible, and you made your choice. If it said that, like, that kind of sense of like, if you put your time in, if you settle into an occupation, you will get a certain reward. That's a societal impulse being projected, saying, settle down and figure something out, whatever, and you will get yours, right? So that's a social contract kind of being emanated that a lot of people were buying. And then I remember really growing up, understanding that was there and wanting to kind of listen to the counterculture, which was going to say, don't trust the FBI. Right. The counterculture was going to say the establishment is the military industrial complex that you were warned about by like Eisenhower. It's like, don't trust it. It's dangerous. And each institution should be looked at under its own circumstances and questioned. That was me in the 90s. And now I'm like, that was the beginning of what appears to be an acid bath into which all of our establishment and institutional sort of forms are being dipped at this time. And it is not to be like, it is what's happening. It's like the end product of beginning to question gets you to a place of a dissolution and hopefully an emergence of what's necessary now. Because like you're saying, the corpse is not going to suit us moving forward. So something needs to emerge from the fundaments of the stuff. We'll probably be living in a mushroom that grows out of the corpse. Perfectly good life form, fungi.
Sure. I've read Jeff Vandermeer before. I know about mushroom people.
We're going to be mushroom people. Great.
No, it is. But I mean, growing up in the 70s, between, like, in my mind, there's just these big things that happen and that changes the tenor of what's going on. But that's all in retrospect. Like in the same way that a clip show of the 60s is Vietnam and the Beatles or something like that.
Laughing.
Right. Nixon on Laughing, going sock it to me. In the 70s, it's like Watergate and then cynicism and just like the souring of what happened in the Summer of Love and all that stuff. And I don't know if that was really what it felt like to live through it.
It did. I mean, being a kid then, I remember almost like a sepia-toned connectivity to the Depression, right? It was beat. It was beat in the 70s. Like there were gas lines, and there were like just a sense of post 60s idealism turned to drugged out hippies and Jesus freaks. And like, it was a little beat. I loved it because I lived in I lived in a rural suburb and we were just rolling around in the backs of pickup trucks full of kids, no safety. It was just it was this interesting time.
Yeah.
But it is something where like we did not know how many hitchhikers we were losing. Like it was a kind of like awareness was in a different space. Right. And a lot of people were falling through the cracks all over the place. And like, I think post internet, and watching the new generation coming up, new generations, we're just trying to figure out what it feels like to be as aware as we are. And as concerned as we are, if we don't put blinkers on, essentially, as concerned as we are about other people, because our concern has been created by this window that doesn't shut off, that shows us how much suffering and inequality we're looking at, worldwide. It's just, I do see progress and madness. Progress and madness.
Those are two of the best ways to describe the current age.
We're progressing to madness.
Well, maybe. You're from Pembroke, right?
That's right.
How did your parents end up there?
It was a commuter distance from Boston, where my dad was working. And so in I think 66, actually, they bought this. Pembroke is like a lot of, it's some highway and kind of like commercial area. And then it's a lot of just woods and marshes and bogs, a lot of cranberry bogs. So we grew up on a cranberry bog in the woods. In this.
Sorry, what's a cranberry bog?
It's if you've ever had a cranberry, they come from these cranberry bogs, which are these flat, like expanses of low shrub. It's like but it is a shrub that requires a huge amount of water, so it grows in a sort of a man-made depression that is like a man-made sort of marsh that they can flood and pull the water out in accordance with the growing needs of this thing. So they're like, it can be a mile across, and it's all just like beautiful sort of burgundy shrubbery, crisscrossed by causeways and policed by really irritable guys that do not want to see kids. We were always running away from these guys that were just get off the bogs. Anyway, it was fun. A lot of fun.
Get off my bog.
Get off my bog, kid. I feel for them, because we must have been just an endless harassment,
Oh yeah. I remember. So where I lived, it's now overdeveloped, but there were tons of farmland and forest around. And if we wanted to get to the strip mall where Little Caesars was to get crazy bread, which is, there's not much else to do in the summer besides walk to the Blockbuster. This is before we could drive. There was a strip mall, Blockbuster. There was a Little Caesars, and some other stuff. So we'd walk there, rent a movie, get some crazy bread.
Yep.
You'd have to walk through farmland to get there.
Yeah.
And I just remember one time a farmer with a shotgun being like, "Hey, what are you doing?"
Yep.
And we're just like, just going to get crazy bread. And he's like, please don't walk. Like, he was very nice about it, but he had just seen like people moving through his land. And he's like, I better see what's going on. And he's like, please do not walk through my farmland again.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a developing area. Like, we had lots of legends of shotguns filled with rock salt, where the kids would say they had been shot by the bogmen. Because the rock salt would only it wouldn't go too deep. It would be like a surface, but it would burn.
Yeah.
So, they were pretty upset. Anyway, it's we had something similar in that it was a developing suburb with a lot of areas. Like, we would get on our bikes and ride to get pizza and penny candy and stuff like that. It essentially another time, because the chains that kind of came along and developed, I was still in a sort of a mom and pop kind of greater suburb of Boston. I think we had Dunkin' Donuts.
Okay. That seems right for Boston, or anywhere around Boston.
Oh, yes. I don't know how. I mean, it's like Starbucks. I don't know how they maintain the number of Dunkin' Donuts that they maintain per capita in Massachusetts. Anywho,
Yeah. Oh, it's funny. There was still a penny candy store. I grew up in Reading, Pennsylvania. There was still a penny candy store there into the 90s. I think it's gone now. But I remember going in there to get candy, and they had all kinds of cards. So not just baseball cards, but there was a card series that I vividly remember called Dinosaurs Attack, which was...
Yes, I remember Dinosaurs Attack. That was a crazy... I mean, that was an old repurposed card series by the time you saw it in the 90s, I believe. I think it had already been published more than once. And that was gory.
Yeah. Extremely gory.
Yeah.
There was
nightmare shit. Like,
Yeah. It's had to have affected me. It was about, for the listener, it was about dinosaurs. Some mad scientist was teleporting dinosaurs from the past into the present, except that the time travel teleportation thing, if it happened to appear in the middle of something, if someone was there where it was teleporting, they would just merge into this creature. And so there are all these pictures on the cards of like a Tyrannosaurus with like human beings stuck inside it, but alive. It was really disturbing to see as a child.
Yes. It had a lot of weird, I mean, Mars Attacks was another series.
Yes.
That turned into the Burton movie, but it was before that a card series that had similar, like, feverish. It sort of felt like it came from that EC horror comics kind of, like, where it was really, and you look at like some of the nightmares coming out of Japan, like manga, and like people really mining the deep nightmare stuff of human experience. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just available to us as kids at that. Like, children now are watching Bluey, and
what's Bluey?
It's the one TV show I know to reference that kids are watching.
Is it for kids? Is it like a little, because they're also probably watching like Faces of Death.
Well, I'm wondering. I'm like, is there, or there's like, actually, you know what? I said this as if it's like much different now, but I remember reading an article a couple years ago that the YouTube algorithm worked in such a way that if you sat your kids down to watch something on YouTube, to watch an actual kid show, after that ran out, and that maybe it would play something else normal. But after that, there was a company that would just use AI animation to like put a bunch of things together. And the stuff that it was putting together was just random based on whatever the AI algorithm was just doing. Mm-hmm. And it was like an insane feverish nightmare. Like, I remember seeing like a purple pregnant Spider-Man.
Yes.
And things like that are like stuff that I would maybe come up with as a joke.
Yeah.
But that the AI was just like, however it was built, was just like assembling into this genuine nightmare that children were watching.
Was it CG or was it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I've seen some of that, and it's like, well, but then there's stuff that's intentionally made by people for the kid market also. That's crazy. It's like, because it's speaking a language we don't speak, you know, like, and it's being more and better tuned to this pre-verbal wherever we were before we were there. And it's like, it's all really crazy. I mean, I'm not saying the AI pregnant, purple Spider-Man has been carefully tuned to that. That seems more like a scatter shot method of trying to create the new mythology.
But I guess there's nightmare fuel no matter what age you grow up in.
I had plenty. I think more of it came from running around and being in the real world, and more of it came from self-generated nightmare. Like, you know, we were terrified of being abducted and terrified of, you know, I remember thinking Yasser Arafat had people operating in our area, right? Like as a kid, thinking that there was some kind of terrorist situation going on, and like, because I was just creating my own fantasy world. Like, we had sort of gotten into a maintenance shed, a bog house, and there was a little desk, and inside the desk was a newspaper clipping about Yasser Arafat. And to me, that was because I was looking for the mystery.
Yeah.
Right. So clearly, right? Anyway, so that was, I guess this is a old guy saying those times were better. For me, from my point of view, it was a lot more internal activity as I was running around in a real environment, generating my own version of a reaction video, and experiencing it as an actual reaction. And anyway, now I think we're in a place where the human destiny is to sort of have our attention exploded almost beyond recognition and then form a new kind of way of being. I imagine being pretty alienated by Generation Double C.
No, I mean, I already feel a little alienated. Mm-hmm. And I think it is because of this thing you're talking about where even though I was a child of the 80s and you were a child of the 70s, I think there's similarities, especially because like I spent a lot of time with my friends making up worlds, living in them, playing outside, like a lot of tactile kinds of things. And I know kids today do the same kinds of stuff, but there's something different about having surveillance devices on us all the time. Yeah. And having this consciousness, this awareness that someone can be watching you at any time, where I didn't have that growing up. I grew up in this bubble. And I think about this a lot because, living especially in Los Angeles and being in the entertainment industry, I think about fame, not like I want fame, but I think about how the existential transformations of fame. And my personal theory is that fame or any kind of like public recognition is this awareness that at any time someone is watching a version of you, or someone is listening to a version of you, or someone is watching some thing you've made that you've put your ego into. And so in some way that is some part of you, right?
It's so like the immortality of the pharaoh. Your name is written on enough rocks.
Yeah. So you have this kind of like, it makes you a little bit neurotic and makes you a little bit paranoid in a way that I don't think if you grew up prior to whatever, the mid 2000s, however, the mid aughts, however you want to draw the line again.
Yeah.
I'm not pedantic about it. If you grew up before then, unless you were
the
famous,
smartphone, maybe before the smartphone.
That's great. That's great. You didn't have that awareness. And I think everyone has that awareness all the time. Whereas you really had to be famous before to have that awareness that someone is, but now like you can be anyone, you can upload something to TikTok, it goes viral. And now suddenly you're thinking like, oh my God, millions of people are watching me. And that transforms your consciousness. I'm not going to put a good or a bad on it. I'm just saying it does transform it. And it transforms people into more neurotic, paranoid kinds of people, I think.
I mean, I would say that we're probably, it certainly does that to me. I mean, I think that we're all in a place where like, we're overstimulated and we're sort of like almost over capable, like suddenly, so that you say like, you don't even require going viral to, like, if you watch everyone, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, they have become curators of a public facing front.
Right.
And it is a famous persona, even if only like a few hundred people, even if no one follows, but like you're still in this place of putting your shingle out in a public exhibitionary space. Everyone practically is doing it. And everyone is now running a channel called themselves and putting content on the channel that they call themselves. And it is I'm obsessed with YouTube. So this is, I always think about this stuff and I'm interested very much in exactly this. Then there's this great video that I like to play. It's a video, it's a short, I think, that's on YouTube, but It's just something caught in real life, right? Which is during a baseball game, way up in the nosebleed seats, there's this guy who has made a glider, and the game is going on way, way down and it's a pro game, and he just throws the glider, and someone is filming it, and they watch this glider kind of swoop down, and I mean, it's 1,000 feet away. It's fucking it's a ways away, and this glider just drifts, and it goes over the heads of people and catches some lift, and it keeps drifting, and you watch the crowd catching eye of this glider and realizing, whoa, from the furthest out of the theater of this event, someone has sent something from the furthest reaches of the audience, and it maybe will cross. And they watch and they gather, and there's like welling cheer gathers as this glider goes all the way down, and it crosses the proscenium of like the audience to the field of play, and it goes into the diamond, and it lands on the green, and everyone goes fuck wild, right? Because someone has achieved, they've broken that border. Audience to theater, audience to spotlight, and that's the time we're in, you know, like. And it's happening all over the place. And you see the audience going, maybe we're part of this in a way that is, I'd say, fairly unprecedented, you know, and therefore the elimination of audience is a little bit like what's going to happen if we are going to want to survive a post-industrial revolution existence, because we're going to need to find new games to exist. We're going to need to find, so self-expression is a great way to go if you can no longer drive a truck or cut wheat or maybe even write a movie.
Yeah, but this is what I'm obsessed with, because we grew up in a time where you could have like very solid existential desires, and those existential desires had a chance to be expressed. And I'm wondering, you know, when you were younger, was there a specific ambition you had? Because I know that you started drawing the Tick, you know, in your teens, but was it always, and between the Super 8, was it always, I want to make movies, or I want to make TV, or I want to make art, or was there something else, or was it always this
It was
path?
pretty clear that I wanted to make art, and then specifically decided I was going to be working in, I thought, more film, because that's where the things I most sort of connected with. But I thought, as it turned out, most of my media experience came from television, because I was essentially raised by that television, you know, like many, many people. Yeah. And so that became I think, medium that I am most comfortable with and know backwards and forwards, and, you know, just is in my DNA at this point. But I was, I'd say, very fortunate to be, I had, my dad was an artist. My mom had gone to art school and was a librarian. So very sort of, it was a good place to grow up, to make those choices. And then I happened to be a pretty obsessive inward person. So I did the work, the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours, that a lot of people don't do until they select that thing. It all fell into place for me, to the point where, yeah, my issues were more like forgetting to ask more general questions about the world, because I had decided I wanted to be famous, and I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I wanted to be an artist, you know, like at like 9.
Huh.
So that was, you know, for example, it didn't lend itself to having a successful high school dating career because I was drawing, and I was like, I had my head down, and I was like world building and doing a bunch of stuff that, you know, ended up short shrifting certain bodies of experience, and then anyway, there were things to not experience. It cost certain things, it rewarded in certain ways. But I do think, and this I now refer to my daughter, who is 21 now and at art school, that I'm super grateful she had connected with art, because during this whole period where if I had to peel a kid away from the screen, the tiny screen all the time, I wouldn't have been very good at doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think but art does that. Or you are making art in the tiny screen, but she actually had a discipline she wanted to get better at. And that really saved her from the real mind killer that's out there right now, which is, I'd say, the anesthesia of bottomless entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Which I contribute to as a means of occupation. But anyway.
But did your parents support you in your ambitions?
Oh yeah, I mean they did, but also I happened to I ended up having a comic book when I was 19. Like, they were before they even realized fully what I was doing, there was already I was getting paid. I had publications, and so they were like, oh, I guess that's pretty good. And again, that was in a lot of ways the outcome of early obsessions, good sort of modeling about how to even just hold a pencil and stuff, and then the dumb confidence of being young.
What kind of artist was your dad?
He was initially a fine art painter, a surrealist, at a time when surrealism was really probably like steampunk right now. It was what are you doing? No offense to your many steampunk fans, but where it was he was a brilliant, I think, painter and maker of imagery and stuff, and wanted to paint representationally and create these sort of dream situations at a time when I think it was like the Warhol time. It was the time where we're too cool for that school. We're going to be doing other stuff. We're going to obsess about surface. Why are you putting a picture on that? Anyway, so he got sort of disenchanted and then ended up not fulfilling the artist destiny of going to New York, but instead becoming a commercial art person, creating logos and corporate identities. Design. He was a designer. So it really didn't change, I think, the core values of what he was doing as much as it just the flesh on it. And so he was, he became like the secret weapon of this little ad shop in New England, where he, they would drag him out of his den and just show him to the client and go we have authenticity. And then they go, oh, that's enough, Richard, that's enough, okay. And then we put him back. And he would be the engine of some pretty amazing design campaigns and stuff. Yeah. And so he was always generating drawing, and it was like being exposed to a kind of raw, from the point of view of a kid, a kind of raw perfection.
Yeah.
Because he could draw so well. And so I kind of grew up thinking he could draw better than he could, and applying that standard to myself. I would say, that the notion of the perfect is the enemy of the good, which everyone describes. The first time I heard that, I mean, someone said it to me because I was like not allowing something to move forward because it wasn't good enough. And they were saying, hey, we got to get this going. You know, the perfect is the enemy of the good. And I was like, and it should be. So that's not how you do it. That's how you don't do it. Which is something that I've had to overcome.
Yeah.
You know? And barely have, really. You know, I mostly do things, make blueprints for things, and then decide, well, there's no way to bring that to perfection. So I have many stacks of blueprints, and only a few things that I've kind of completely executed.
Mm-hmm. Did your dad have I don't know how to put this exactly, I'll just say surrealist state of mind? I don't mean was he living his life like Salvador Dali, but I just mean like that kind of like enchantment or wonder in the world. Did that, was that the state of mind he was in?
I'd say so. It was weird because like for him, this was all, there are no souls. It's all over when you're dead, which might be the case. Cool. But like for him, it was very much, I'm surprised at the tremendous wonder that he managed to experience almost all the time. Like he was a big fan of light and light passing through things. And like all our windows were full of things that he had found to put in the windows because each one might be, you know, a lump of glass or some coal, obsidian or something. You know, each one had a way of catching light. And so he was that, I would say, which is great. You know, I mean, to grow up in the space of a functioning artist, I'd say was really great to have as an experience. It had pressures that came along with it, but if you chose to follow that, but like it, you know, to learn that creation is possible. I think a lot of people grow up and everything that they hold or pick up it comes from some magic place of making that they're not allowed to go to, you know, because they weren't given that authority. Anytime I hear someone say that I'm not a creative person, I'm like, that is like all you are. like all you have been doing. Yeah. Even if you don't marshal it or recognize it, it has been creating either chaos or order from the moment you put your socks on. Like you have been creating, right? And if you don't think you're a creative person, you're probably creating mayhem. Anyway, a blah-de-blah, as they might say.
Was there ever an inflection point where you might have done something else? I
mean, I operate in music. Which is another form of creativity. And I think I had my fantasy to some degree might have been pursuing that, but that's just another path toward the same general set of goals. The idea of being, I don't think I've had that option. That's part of the simplicity and clarity that I am grateful for. Is like, and I've dicked around way more than most people, way more, but like with a central theme, you know, and that has made all the difference.
I mean, I wish I could talk to you for hours, but but that actually seems like a really nice place to end.
Yeah.
Ben, thank you so much for joining me. I really,
that's great.
I really appreciate it. I appreciate since I was a teenager, I really don't say this lightly, but I think the tick did change my trajectory in life.
That's, I hope that worked out.
It has. It has.
It's been nothing but crack. And
I'm miserable. Nothing has worked out, but it did change my trajectory.
It really changed it, man. No. I mean, I'm very pleased that you watched it and liked it. You know, and if it had, I know personally what you mean, because what I was creating was designed to reach out to me when I had that experience, where my experience would have been like different things. Like, did you ever see the Bakshi Mighty Mouse that Crick Falusi was on?
Yes, when I was, yes. I remember that very directly. Yeah.
That did something to me that I then, cycle of abuse that I then, those sort of things I had experience, or Monty Python and the Holy Grail, like things that just broke through and made me go, wait a minute, there's something happening here that I need to know more about and want to connect with, that changed what I looked at and changed where I looked for things. So if that had an effect on you like that, that's a pleasing effect for me to hear about, is what I mean to say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks again. And thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
Yeah. All right. Maybe we'll see each other out on the line.
Yeah. See you out on the picket line.
WGA strong.
Solidarity.
All right, man.
All right. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye.